In one of the programs, we talked about how Solovyoy's programs blur the essence of what is happening today in world relations, because such an excess of information, which has descended to the sixth priority of governance, this situation was very clearly described by Pushkin in his time. He talks about a similar situation. You whose swords clash in contest gory, persist in your dread rivalry, pay tribute full to somber glory, and relish hate and enmity. Let the world gaping at your deadly encounters freeze none will try. To interfere more none will sadly, of pity for you breathe a sigh. These are the words of Pushkin, which are addressed to all participants of Solovyoy's programs without exception. In these programs there is discussion at this level. So what is the essence of what is happening? The essence of what is happening is that one needs to comprehend the entire matrix of global governance of humanity. And staying on the level of the military priority, you still will not understand anything. Today, I would like to talk about economics in approximately the same plane. The fact is that today, only the lazy are not talking about shortcomings and miscalculations in the economic sphere. There are countless recipes, solutions, and tips. I will mention some of these personal contacts on this topic. Yevgeny Fedorov. I have met with him, and he constantly talks about the central bank and the Federal Reserve System, and in general, he says it seems to be correct. Sergei Glaziev. Look how many fiery programs, statements, videos he has. Vsevolod Chaplin. Not so long ago, we met in Moscow. We even agreed that he would visit our university. He says the right things about the relationship between church and credit dealings. And the topic of the lecture which I asked him to give our students was church and credit. Well, now you see that with Vsevolod Chaplin, there are such serious transformations with his official position. This is certainly related to his position. What's more, a petition from the Schiller Institute in Economics came out to us. A very serious women's team from Australia recently came. They represented the position of Lyndon LaRouche. They have a very powerful team with a ton of information on the internet about this. A number of our interesting domestic researchers have also contacted me. In particular, one of their works tells in detail how it would be necessary to change the banking system, to separate, in fact, the banking system and the system associated with the treasury. That is, a proposal to create a budgetary and treasury bank that would simply carry out calculations, gold and foreign exchange reserves, emission. The idea is quite interesting and correct. And behind the central bank, of course, there should be supervision, control. Banks must be specialized. For example, deposit and savings investment, mortgage. And if you look at these proposals, then in fact they boil down to the basic understanding that three circuits of money circulation should be placed. Internal money circulation, non-cash money and cash respectively, and external gold and foreign exchange circulation. It makes no sense to keep all this in one bottle. And the mission of the Treasury today is clearly not being fulfilled in full, as it could be. After all, why link the problem of settlements between legal entities and some kind of banking operations? These are completely different functions. And there are many such proposals. But what is the peculiarity of all those authors whom I have listed? It is that they want to solve economic problems while remaining within the framework of the economic priority of governance. This is impossible in principle, because in order to really change the situation, it is necessary to understand the matrix. It is necessary to understand the whole set of priorities of social governance that is used, and to see the place of the credit and financial system, the banking system, and finance in this global matrix. If we do not see this picture as a whole, then it's impossible to solve anything, staying within the framework of this cell, because the basis of economy is nraviousness. Seeing the mosaic picture of everything that is happening, we can already talk about a separate fragment of this mosaic, about particulars. There are no changes in economy today, not because there is something that those who govern the economy do not understand. For many years, I also believed that all one needs to do is explain, clarify, enlighten, and then everything would change. No, unfortunately, those who govern the economy and who govern finances understand perfectly well, but they are simply solving a different problem. They solve the problem of how to make money work not for the whole society, but for a very narrow elite circle, which commissions this work from them, which appoints them to this position. Therefore, they are asked. I would like to emphasize the importance of this circumstance for all those who are supporters of the conception of social safety, and emphasize that our difference from any political parties, from any current analysts, is that we always talk about what is happening exclusively from a conceptual standpoint, meaning firstly, the 6 priorities of governance, and second, that we do not welcome kaleidoscopic consideration of reality. We're talking about the need to have a mosaic approach. I'm often asked the same question. What is your opinion? Does Putin understand the role of interest, or does he not understand? The answer to this question is not so simple, and I can only say by looking at the ongoing global events of today. In my opinion, Putin is one of the rare leaders who really knows how to hold the matrix and who perfectly understands integrity, the holistic picture. And thanks above all to this, he has already won undeniable authority as a world leader today. My opinion is that in this particular issue, someone very skillfully set a certain block in order that he not understand this problem from the point of view of the lending rate and inflation ratio. I have been looking for an answer to this question for several years now, and today I will quote only 2 stories, which in my understanding indicate that this topic for Putin has been blocked by someone very skillfully and adeptly. I understand roughly how this is achieved, and for sure many of our programs are watched by both Kremlin analysts and people close to Putin. I would like some of them to find the courage to have a very detailed conversation on this topic. The fact is that unfortunately, this question cannot be covered in 5, 10, 15 minutes. You need to spend at least a few hours on this theme, and preferably at least a day. And to conduct this conversation in the mode of question-answer dialogue, and not in the form of a monologue. Why do I say that such a conversation is necessary? The fact is that Putin obviously understands the entire deadly role of high lending rates for the development of Russia. And I myself have repeatedly given quotes that we simply have to lower the lending rate. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, he understands, but he mistakenly associates a high lending rate with the fact that we have high inflation. In fact, there is a cause and there is an effect. And proponents of the conception of social safety quite naturally perceive that the primary generator of inflation is the lending rate. What you ask for in lending rate, you get that kind of inflation. But if you look at the information matrix of today, in 99% of cases on all channels, in all mass media, from many scientists, the same idea sounds, that lending rate is determined by the inflation rate. I think that this thought at one time was very deeply rooted in the unconscious levels of the psyche of our president, and he is not to blame for this. It is his misfortune that he found himself in such a situation. To change this is quite difficult. I talk about this with professional economists, and I know how difficult it is to convince them. They also believe that our rate is high because we have inflation. But after all, Putin's problem is that he did not stew in this topic. He has never been directly connected in his previous work with the economy. And when such basic links are laid on the unconscious levels of the psyche, it is extremely difficult to get out of them. I will give, as promised, just 2 examples. We all remember the speech of the Russian politician Yevgeny Stepanovich Savchenko at the State Council, where he said that the main obstacle to the country's development is the high lending rate. And then he says that we are assured that we have a high lending rate due to the fact that we have large inflation. I would like to say the truth about what is happening is exactly the opposite of what he said. Quite simply, we have high inflation due to the fact that we have set a high lending rate. Place a lending rate like our competitors in the West, and you will not have inflation. The State Council concludes in support of Savchenko's position. Alexei Vasilievich Gordyev presents and also speaks of the inadmissibility of such a lending rate. But in the conclusion, Putin speaks and says that yes, we raised the issue of the lending rate. This is an important issue, but we have high inflation. If our president understood this connection, and would have done it deliberately, as if at the behest of customers, if he had somehow been trying to conceal the usury, he would never have spoken this phrase because it is not true. But if he says this, and he speaks as a rule always from the heart, then this means he really just understands what is happening in this way. Otherwise he would simply have kept silent, would have said nothing if he had tried to hide the usury. Also, at the last press conference of the president, he was asked exactly the same question, and he again linked the high lending rate with inflationary processes. Therefore today, one of the tasks is to most clearly and imagely figuratively present the true root cause, that loan interest is the source of all the troubles in our statehood, including for the president and for the entire community. Only then can the matrix be changed. A high lending rate stops the development of our processing industry. And we look a little strange when we dance around Europe with a gas and oil pipe made at our own expense and offer primary carriers in every possible way. But just think that for 40 years, the US has categorically prohibited the export of crude oil outside of the US at the legislative level. And actually, isn't this an example to follow? But in order to implement such a scheme, you need to have a lending rate not exceeding 3%. If the rate is more than 3%, then this is already theft, but theft which still allows the vampire not to destroy his victim. If the rate is more than 3%, then you can forget about development. We cannot develop the real production sector. Therefore, I would very much like 2016 to become a year of insight into the economic sphere, so that we understand that the lending rate does not depend on anything but raviousness. To do this, you can turn to the Quran, to Aristotle, and understand that this is a question of the global worldview level of significance, and it depends solely on the worldview and raviousness. And this, in turn, already brings about tens and then hundreds of consequences which arise from it, and which hinder the development of our statehood. Let a new matrix reign in the new year in the sphere of economics, in the sphere of attitudes towards usury.
Отношение к ростовщичеству.